is his first time making an appearance. He came heavily recommended, so the bar is high. Really, he's came very heavily recommended by some of our other professors, and we're thrilled to have him here with us. But tell you a little bit of background. I'm going to read it because otherwise I'll miss it. Just impressive about all the places he's studied and earned degrees. He got his BA from Western Kentucky University, master's at Gordon Cornwall Theological Seminary, a master's at Yale University. One of my really good friends is a Yale graduate. Played football there. He's at Eli, so I'm going to have to tell him about it. His master's of philosophy at Yale University, and his PhD at Yale University. And so at first when I saw 5 things, I didn't know whether he was continuing to get kicked out of each college or no, but he was at Yale. So what impressive. But he's joined the faculty, and I'm sure Carson Newman is thrilled to have him, joined the faculty in 2019, having previously taught at the Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. He teaches both Old and New Testament and serves as director of the Master of Arts in Applied Theology program over at Carson Newman. He's authored numerous articles, including a book, and the book, if you want to look for it, is called The Satan, How God's Executioner Became the Enemy. It was published in 2019, so it sounds like fascinating reading, and I would guess 1 or 2 things you're going to talk about tonight are in that book.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. He loves to teach and mentor students. He's an ordained Baptist minister who has pastored congregations in Connecticut and in Kentucky. He also enjoys preaching and teaching the Bible in various churches. I found out something tonight when I saw he lives in Jefferson County. He lives in Patriot Hills. On Bicentennial, the same street I live on, a block or 2 down. It's amazing. And apparently he said, yeah, you and your wife used to sit on the porch all the time. I said, yep, during COVID there wasn't much else to do. We'd sit on the porch and he'd walk by and we'd wave, and so there we go. So now I know I have a new neighbor. When he's not teaching, preaching, writing, or spending time with his family, which by the way, he's married with a wife and 2 sons. And this is something I hope you'll maybe give us a demonstration before this class is over. He's learning to play the 5-string banjo. So maybe before we're done, you can sneak it in and give us a little song. Not a song about Satan would not be a good idea.
I know, Sympathy for the Devil or something like that.
Devil down in Georgia?
There you go.
That would work. Anyway, Dr. Ryan Stokes, thank you for being with us. We're looking forward to seeing you.
Well, thanks so much for the kind introduction, Greg. I think, if I remember correctly, we planned on doing this last fall.
We did. We absolutely did. Yes.
COVID kind of shut us down or postponed us, but I'm really excited to be here. Loving East Tennessee. I was telling your guy, Eckert, right? Emmert?
Yeah, Bob. Remember Bob?
Okay.
Bob.
The Reverend Pastor Bob Emmert. I was talking about how I'm originally from Kentucky and lived in various places, but East Tennessee is more like home than any place I've been since we lived in Kentucky. It's closer to the culture of Kentucky than Texas is, and certainly closer than Connecticut is. And our kids were born in Connecticut. We got them out of there before they started speaking Yankee. So they have some sort of mishmash Southern accent at this point. But really excited to be here. I guess over the course of the weeks we're going to be together, I'll try to let you get to know me just a little bit. I look forward to getting to know you. I guess the thing that probably is most relevant for you to know about me tonight is that I did write a book on Satan and dealt with some of these topics in that book. We'll talk more about the content of that book a little later on in the series. We'll be dealing with demons and evil spirits and Satan the last couple of weeks or so. And so we'll get into more of the book's material at that point. Sometimes people ask me when they find out that I've written a book on Satan, they say, well, what was that like? And what they mean by this, and sometimes they'll say this explicitly, what they mean by that was, did you have some sort of spiritual encounter or experience that caused you to write this book, or while you were writing it, did something, and I don't know if they expected like my head to turn 360 degrees or something like that. And what I tell them is it's a very historically oriented book. And so I didn't engage in any field work or anything like that when I was writing it, but it was very historically oriented. The one challenge that I faced when I wrote that book was when I came to the very end of writing it. I was getting ready to send it off to the publisher. I realized that I needed to write some sort of dedication at the beginning. And books have dedications at the beginning of them often. But none of my friends wanted a book on the Prince of Darkness dedicated to them. Something that would be, it was my first book, and so I really wanted to dedicate it to my wife. But I didn't think that would be good for my marriage. so what I finally did is there's a verse in Hebrews chapter 2 where it refers to Jesus as the one who took on flesh so that he could render powerless the one that has authority over death in Hebrews 2:8. And so I dedicated it to Jesus, to the one who took on flesh or shared in the children's flesh so they might defeat Satan, or the devil, it calls him there. And I put that in the book, sent it off to the publisher, and about 2 years ago, in July of 2019, I get my box of books in the mail. Before they're in the stores, I get this box of my author's copies of these books, and I start thumbing through it to make sure everything's where it's supposed to be, and I open it up to where the dedication is supposed to be, and the publisher left it out. It was completely missing. They just made an error, and were very apologetic. And what I concluded is that not even Jesus wanted a book on Satan. So orchestrated things so that it would not be included. But that's what I've done, and that's relevant to this. The title of the series, Angels, Demons, Deities, and Devils, I'm still kind of tossing around the idea of writing another book. My book focuses mostly on Satan and evil spirits and demons. And it's very academic, it's very technical. I'm not going to try to sell you copies because it's just lots of Hebrew and Aramaic and Greek, and it's not really written for general consumption. It's more for advanced students. But I thought about writing a book that's pitched more to intelligent church people. Not for the specialist scholars who studied all the ancient languages, but just intelligent folks in the church who really want to learn more about the topic. And this was the title that I'm considering for that book. Who knows whether I'll get around to writing that book or not. I think I would enjoy that, but I may not do that. That's the title of the series. This particular lecture, the first one, is entitled Angels, Debunking Myths, and Delineating Methods. Now, Greg, a few weeks ago I sent you like a list of topics for all the weeks. Has anyone seen that besides you?
I don't think so. Maybe Chad, but
okay. I'm trying to remember what I said. I think next week is talks about different kinds of angels. Week 3, we're going to talk about the story of the fall of the angels. Week 4, we'll talk about demons and evil spirits, and week 5, we'll talk about Satan. So we're going to have 5 total weeks. That's the way it kind of lays out. Today, this is more introductory. What do we know about angels? What do we think we know about angels that maybe we don't really know? And how do we even engage in this? Like if we want to study what the Bible says about angels, how do we do that? And so that's what we're talking about tonight. Now, when I was preparing for this, and actually I did this, I taught a class several years ago at Western Kentucky University on this topic. And I taught it again at Southwestern Seminary. And I think it was the time I taught it at Southwestern Seminary that I did a little bit of research that's going to go into this particular discussion tonight. Where I'm getting this information that I'm getting ready to present to you is from 2 volumes. One of them is the Baker's Dictionary of Theology, or Dictionary of Biblical Theology. I had this written down in my notes, but it didn't make it into the PowerPoint. But the Baker Dictionary of Theology. The other source is Charles Hodge's Systematic Theology. And those are the 2 sources from which I'm getting the material that I'm getting ready to present to you. And here's what those guys say, or this is at least a combination of what those that one reference work and the one work of a systematic theologian, what those sources say about angels. And what I read in those sources is that there are 7 classes of angels. And here are the 7 angels. There are seraphim. Now, seraphim are actually only mentioned in one passage in the Old Testament. Does anyone happen to know where seraphim are found in the Old Testament?
Isaiah 6.
Isaiah 6, that's right. Actually, the word seraphim occurs in a few different places, but that's the one place where they seem to refer to heavenly beings. We'll talk about those in a few weeks. There are cherubim. We encounter cherubim a little more frequently in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament. You have cherubim. We just talked about Genesis 3 in my Old Testament class today, and there are cherubim that guard the entrance to the Garden of Eden once humans are kicked out of it. There are 2 cherubim or cherubs on the Ark of the Covenant. That's absolutely right. By the way, when you see a word that ends in I-M, like a word from the Old Testament, like seraphim and cherubim, that's just the Hebrew way of saying there's more than one. That's the plural. So a singular would be seraph. There's one seraph, but you have 2 or 3 seraphim. 1 cherub, 2 or 3 cherubim, or you could just say cherubs. So that's where we get the I-M ending of the word. I think the song "Holy, Holy, Holy," cherubim and seraphim falling down before thee, or something like that. Isn't there a line? Yeah. So that's what it means when you have the I-M ending. It just means there's more than one. Other cherubim in the Old Testament as well. You have them in Ezekiel. These are these strange creatures that Ezekiel sees as well. Archangels. Archangels, I believe, are only mentioned in 2 books, or at least by that name. You have an archangel mentioned in Jude, and then another one. I can't remember where the other one is mentioned right now. It seems like it's in maybe in one of the epistles of John, but I can't remember where the other reference to archangel. I'll do that research when we get ready to talk about the different types of angels in a couple of weeks. So I'm not held accountable for knowing this information tonight. Rulers. The Apostle Paul talks about rulers, principalities, and authorities. And so here are 3 more classes of angels that these reference works I consulted mentioned. And then finally, ministering spirits. The book of Hebrews talks about ministering spirits. God makes angels to be ministering spirits, or what are angels, but ministering spirits. I can't remember exactly how the quotation in Hebrews goes. So these are the 7 classes of angels that I discovered in these reference works that I consulted. These are, by the way, Christian theologians, Christian reference works. They're academic, but these are not. If you were to look what Islam says about heavenly beings, you would find different sorts of things. But these are the Christian reference works that I consulted. These are the 7 classes of angels. These reference works also revealed to me, or what they communicated, was that there are certain attributes that describe angels. One of these attributes has to do with their physical essence, if we can refer to their physical essence. These beings are spiritual. And what spiritual means, according to these books, is that angels do not have bodies. That's what the books told me. We'll discuss that just a little more in a moment. These angels do not have bodies. Also, they are invisible. They are incorruptible. And I don't know what the articles or the articles in the dictionary meant by saying they were incorruptible. Is that referring to them being morally incorruptible, or is it referring to them being physically incorruptible? They don't decay, or they can't be corrupted physically. The word incorruptible can refer to a physical thing or a moral thing. Angels are immortal. They do not age, or at least not the way that we do, and do not die. And lastly, angels are not omnipresent. This is a really common question I get, especially pertaining to my research on Satan. God is everywhere all the time. You can't go anywhere and be outside of God's presence, at least in one sense. In another sense, you can be separated from God. But in one sense, you can never be outside of God's presence. Is Satan the same way, or are angels the same way? This is something that I'm asked. And according to the sources that I consulted, these scholarly sources at least, angels are not omnipresent, meaning an angel can be in one place at one time. An angel can't be everywhere at one time. So that's the attribute of spirituality, I guess, the spiritual attributes of angels. Angels also have character attributes. So that's what angels are like physically, but what are angels like, personally, in the way they relate? Are they good or bad? And the systematic theology that I read explained it this way. Angels were all created holy. God didn't create evil angels. God created only sinless beings, and these angels were created holy. Then, sometime early on, for a period of time following their creation, but a period of time that has come to an end, the theologian says that during a period of probation, some of these angels chose to remain holy, others chose to become evil. So there was a period of time early on where angels had the ability to pick sides. They had the ability to decide which team they were going to be on, I guess. And some of these angels chose to remain holy, others chose to become evil, and you can probably, your mind right now is probably going to the story of the fall of Satan and the fall of the angels, and this is the story that these scholars have in mind, I think, here.
Explain probation.
Probation means that there's something contingent, something that is not a permanent state quite yet. So if a student at Carson Newman is on academic probation, that means if they go to class and earn good grades and their behavior isn't horrible, that they can continue to be a student at Carson Newman and eventually graduate. But if the student is on academic probation and continues to fail classes or behaves in a certain way, they can actually kind of lose their status as a student. And so, according to these scholars, I don't think they define probation quite in those terms, but there's a period of time in which it was within the angel's power either to do this or that, either to become good or evil.
Even though they were holy, they then were, and probably would not have had free will, they were given that.
I think this understanding of the angels presumes that there's some free will on their part. That's a great question. Now, does this assume that they still have free will, or is their free will somehow limited now that the period of probation is over? And that's a question that these scholars don't go into.
Just curious.
Yeah.
It said the angels are invisible. Is that?
It did say angels are invisible.
I know that angels, for instance, over the book of Daniel, when Daniel was praying and wrestling, something was sent to him, giving him information. And he said, I wanted to come, but, I was, Michael, I was detained, and I was not able to come. Are we missing something? Did this angel take some kind of human body? Help me explain.
That's a great question. And I believe how these scholars, how they deal with that is they say that angels are invisible, they don't have bodies, but they can take the appearance of being embodied to appear to people. So kind of like they
appeared to Mary.
Kind of like that.
They wrestled with Jacob.
Right.
That's physical body. That's fine.
Right.
That's not something you can see through the hands through this.
Right.
Physical.
Yeah. And these scholars are certainly aware of those passages. And so I think what they're getting at is that that's kind of a special form that they take for the purpose of appearing to people, when they want to reveal themselves to people, or when they want to interact in a way that's interact with humans who are physical. Does that make sense?
Or can they work for people?
Can they work for people?
Through people.
What do you mean by work through people?
Like the Holy Spirit sometimes will lead you to do something, and people say, I had an angel. Like you felt like an angel to me today. Would that be the same kind of thing?
Yeah, we'll get into kind of their activity. That's actually the next slide, I think. I believe it is. I can't see it yet on the screen, but it talks about what they do. And so we'll talk about that in just a moment. Good question. You're not quite persuaded yet. Give me a few more minutes.
Take a few more weeks.
Or a few more weeks, yeah, maybe. All right. And this gets to kind of the end of what these guys are saying. Now that the probationary period is over, angels are either permanently holy or permanently evil. You're not going to have angels rebelling and falling from heaven now. That's something that happened back then. You don't have to worry that an angel that is good now is going to turn on you or anything like that, or turn on God. Yes, ma'am?
Okay, so angels are immortal. So are angels being created now and then, or did they all come from the beginning of time? I mean, when did he create them, and where? I mean, are there continuing creation of angels?
I've seen all kinds of pictures of baby angels. So they're coming from somewhere, right? Yes.
That's a cherub.
Or is it? Yeah, that's a good question. Is that what a cherub looks like? These scholars didn't ask that. I think they're working with the assumption that it was just kind of a one-time thing where the angels were created, and He's not making you angels this week.
Okay, so they all came from God's creation at the beginning.
I think so. At least angel production has been shut down because of COVID. But it's going to resume. That's right.
The angels were created for Adam and Eve because the angel turned into a serpent while they were in the Garden of Eden. That's before anything else. So they were already there before the earth and that was created, in my opinion.
That's pretty typical for the. I don't think they get into the timing of it, but that the angels are before humans, before Genesis 1, or maybe between Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 and Genesis 1 verse 3, and you also have in Job, it talks about the sons of God shouting for joy and start singing when God creates humans.
Yeah,
I believe that's what it is in Job. 30, I was going to say 38 or 39, but 37 is good.
I want to argue with Jack.
What did you say, Bob? I'm sorry. Say it again.
Job 37 or chapter 38, when the angels sing when at creation. That's what he was referring to.
Yeah, 37 may be right. I can't remember that.
I'm sorry.
No, please. Please, thank you. Let's see here. So we talked about like the spiritual state of angels, the character of angels, the moral character. Now the activity of angels, and these scholars give just two things that angels do. They worship God, and this is what we see angels doing in a lot of passages. You have visions of heaven, and angels are worshiping God. Isaiah's vision of the seraphim, they're saying, "Holy, holy, holy." John's vision of heaven in Revelation. Angels, among all kinds of other creatures, are worshiping God in heaven. So that's one of the things that angels do. The other thing that they do is execute God's will. They do what God tells them to do. So could that at times, when someone asked me, could they, what's your name? Teresa, can they work through humans? I suppose that's possible. That kind of would fall under the category of executing God's will, if that's something God wants them to do. But yeah, I suppose that would be possible. All right.
Do we have any idea in the fall of the angels, the ones that rebelled, what the portion was of the total angels that rebelled?
That's a really good question, and I think we'll be in a better position to answer that in a couple of weeks. We'll talk about that rebellion of the angels and their fall. You do have this number, the dragon sweeping a third of the stars of heaven out of the sky with his tail, and that's often interpreted to mean that the stars are the angels who rebelled with the dragon, and so a third of them fell. But that's not clear to me that that's exactly what that's referring to. And I don't know what the total number of angels is to begin with either. Is it a third of 6, or is it
third of 6,000?
Third of 6,000? Yeah, it could be 2,000 angels. Exactly 2,000 angels. All right, so there is. If you were to look up a book of systematic theology, especially one that was written 50 or 60 years ago, that's pretty much what you're going to get on Christian beliefs, Christian theology about angels, what the Bible says about angels, about the 7 classes of angels, about their nature, about their character, about their activity. Yes?
Just going to ask about the word angel meaning messenger. And would that fall under, activity of angels? I was thinking maybe deliver messages, but would you kind of be including that in to execute God's will? You
That's
said
right.
this message, and that's part of it.
That's right. So that would be one way that they might carry out God's will by delivering the message. And you're correct. Angel does mean messenger, both in Hebrew and in Greek. So in the Old Testament, they use the word for messenger, and in the New Testament, they use the word messenger to refer to these beings. Good. All right. Now, here's the problem with everything that I just told you. Most of that is not in the Bible. And these ideas persist today. A lot of people just accept that these things. You're questioning, you're like, wait a second here, and you're right to question it because the Bible doesn't say a lot of this, a lot of the stuff that oops, wrong way. Here we go. That we were just saying. So, for instance, this slide here. This was the first slide. It says there are 7 classes of angels. Now, we do have these 7 different kinds of heavenly beings listed here, but it never says in the Bible that there are only 7 classes. It never says that here's the exhaustive list. Here are all of the classes of angels, and woe to the one who adds to these or takes away. There's nothing like that in the Bible. You have these different heavenly beings mentioned, but it never says that these are the 7. Kind of like spiritual gifts. Like how many spiritual gifts are there? Well, we don't really have an exhaustive list in the New Testament, so we don't know how many spiritual gifts there are, possibly. Now, even more fundamentally, what's wrong with this slide is neither does the Bible say that these are even classes of angels. It's often assumed that a seraph is a kind of angel and a cherub is a kind of angel, but there is not actually any passage in the Bible that says a seraph is an angel, or an angel is a seraph, or that a cherub is an angel, or that an angel is a cherub, or that... Now, archangel, that's one that I think we can be pretty confident that's a kind of angel. It has the word angel in the title. But other than that one, none of these beings are ever said to be angels. Now, maybe these are classes of angels. Maybe they're not. Maybe there's something other than an angel. Or maybe an angel is a class of principality. We don't really know. The Bible doesn't tell us this. Let's see if I can give you an example. We know what the difference. I don't know if any of you like horror movies or scary movies. We're getting, it's almost October now, isn't it? Almost time to start thinking about Halloween, perhaps. But we know what the difference between a vampire and a werewolf and a zombie and a witch and a ghost. We know the difference between all of these things. And we're not confused. We don't think, well, a werewolf is a kind of vampire and a vampire is a kind of ghost. We know that there's a difference. And so when the Bible uses language or uses words like seraph or cherub or angel or ruler, these are often and can often be referring to many different things. These aren't all just one category of angel. So like you remind me your name? Greg. So like Greg said, an angel is a messenger. Now, we don't have any stories where a seraph is being a messenger. We don't have any stories where a cherub is being a messenger. When something is called an angel, it often is. This being often is bearing some sort of message. Not always, but is somehow an ambassador for God. And so it's unlikely in my mind that these are actually different classes of angels. Now, there may be different classes of angels. Maybe there are archangels and there are some lower angels or something like that. I don't find that impossible, but the Bible never really tells us that kind of stuff. What it does mention is that there are different kinds of what we may call heavenly beings, but doesn't really ever parse out how they all relate to each other. And how, it doesn't give us like a clear taxonomy. Like here's the phylum, and here's the species, and here's the class. And I'm probably not getting those in the right order. I haven't studied science in a long time. But it doesn't ever really do that. And it says here the 3 kinds of principalities. I think God's calling, letting me know. He wants me to stop talking about this. Alright. What about this slide here? Attributes of angels being spiritual. Now, we do have statements in the Bible that refer to angels as spirits. Actually, The word spirit seems to be a synonym for angel. The word spirit can be used in different ways in the Bible. Sometimes these beings are simply called spirits. But it never says that angels don't have bodies.
Don't have what?
Bodies. Yeah. As a matter of fact, the Bible seems to assume that angels do have bodies. You have the stories that you were just mentioning with this being wrestling with Jacob. And these angels are seen when they appear to people. Paul in 1 Corinthians is talking about there's one kind of body that's a heavenly body, another type that's an earthly body. It says one day we'll all have spiritual bodies. So spirit doesn't contradict body. There's no incompatibility between the term spirit and the term body. Now there is a little bit of difference between spirit and flesh. And what Paul says is we're not going to have fleshly bodies, we're going to have spiritual bodies one day. But the assumption is that spirits do have bodies. They're just different from our bodies. They're not fleshly bodies. They're not flesh and blood, but they still are bodies.
You're saying they're physical.
Huh?
You're saying they're physical at times.
Well, it depends on what you mean by physical. Right?
Well, can you touch it?
I said, perhaps, but if you touch it, can you feel it? These are questions. The Bible doesn't tell us all of these things, but it does seem to assume that heavenly beings have a different substance from our own. Maybe calling them physical and non-physical, maybe that's not the correct way of distinguishing them.
Jesus came back in the flesh and he told them, don't touch me. Yeah.
Right.
So I tend to believe he probably had that kind of body that you're trying to identify here.
Yeah, that would make sense. Jesus never explains exactly what kind of body he has. He's disappearing and appearing and entering rooms that are locked, but he eats as well.
Yes.
People you can touch his wounds.
Aren't you physical?
I would describe that as physical.
Yeah.
I would describe that as physical. It just depends on what you mean by physical. There's a substance there that the Bible assumes there's a body. It's just it's made of different stuff. It's made of spiritual stuff rather than flesh. And when we're raised from the dead, if Jesus is our model for resurrection, and as Paul teaches, our bodies are going to be raised from the dead, and we're not going to be bodiless. We're going to have new bodies that are better bodies that are going to be incorruptible, in a sense. I had a student at Southwestern who, a PhD student, wrote his dissertation on God's body, and asked the question, does God have a body in the Bible? And looked at different passages that describe God in a similar way to an angel. God appearing, being seen, God touching people, being touched. God is spirit, so is it a spiritual body, or are we incorrect? I had another friend at Southwestern Seminary. He was talking to me one time. He said a student asked him if God had skin. And he sort of rolled his eyes and said, "That's just a horrible question. Our students that they would even ask that is silly." I said, "Well, wait a second here. Does the Bible say that God doesn't have skin? It says that he's spiritual, but so he's not flesh, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have something." And that's a conversation for another time. But this relates.
But we were made in his likeness. We have skin.
That's what I think it means. Well, I talked with students about this just last week. What does it mean that we're made in God's image? And I think sometimes we dismiss the idea that we look like God. We look for some more sophisticated spiritual explanation when maybe it just means likeness. It means image, that we look like God. Not that God has the same limitations that we do, but just the fact that God is spirit, as it says in John 4, and angels are spirit, that doesn't mean that they are therefore bodiless.
They have no form. That means they do have form.
They have some sort of form. Yeah. And by the way, this is exactly what the word spirit in Hebrew and Greek both mean. It doesn't mean that that there's nothing. It just is a different kind of stuff. What about God? What about angels being invisible? Well, yeah, sometimes. Other times you see them. So should we say angels are invisible? Maybe it's better to say that they can be invisible, not that they are in their essence invisible. Incorruptible. What does it mean to be incorruptible? If we have evil angels, then were they corrupted? Does it mean that they don't age? So I'm not going to put an X through invisible or incorruptible, but more of a sort of question mark by those. What about immortal? Let's see, go ahead and put a question mark by immortal. There's actually one passage. Psalm 82 refers to the sons of the Most High being sentenced to death by God. And it's possible that psalm refers to God having these divine beings or angels or whatever you want to call them, having them executed because of what they've done. There are different ways of interpreting that passage, so I'm not going to be dogmatic about that. But there's no passage in the Bible that say that angels never die. We don't have that. If God wanted to sentence some to death, I guess I would agree that God is able to do that. Now, not omnipresent, I'm fine with that. I don't see anything in the Bible that leads me to believe that angels are omnipresent. Neither does the Bible say that they're not. So I guess I'm happy not to be firm on this point. But I'm not going to put an X through this because I find that entirely plausible.
It does say that Satan is not omnipresent the way God is, and he's a fallen angel.
It refers to Satan roaming around the earth, right? Is that what you're referring to?
He does that also, but he's not everywhere in one place.
Right.
But he's got his minions, as it were, other his fallen angels that are throughout the world, and I'm sure that they can.
He networks.
Yeah.
That's right.
He's not like God, he can't be everywhere, but he can network.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. The Bible never says that explicitly in my knowledge. Like, it never says Satan is only in one place at one time. Now, what I would say is the fact that it doesn't say that he's everywhere probably means that he's just at one place at one time. But you may be recalling a passage that I'm forgetting about. That's certainly possible. That's certainly possible.
I'm sorry, when you were talking about it, you said something about Psalms, and you gave a
Psalm 82 refers to God passing judgment in the assembly of the gods, or the assembly of the sons of the Most High, it calls them. And it says, I said that you were gods, but you will die like humans. And so one way of interpreting that passage is that these are divine beings that God is sentencing to death. Another way is saying they really weren't divine beings, they were humans. I don't think that makes the best sense of the passage, but it is possible to read it that way. Yeah, you're wrong. Yeah, Psalm 82 is a fun one. Although if you read it, look at different English translations of it, because there are some ambiguous Hebrew expressions there, and different English translations deal with that passage differently.
That's the scary part. Man deciding. Mankind has got King James Version, you've got your Hebrew, you've got, what about the last goods? What about the book of Enoch?
I'm going to mention that on a slide here pretty soon. Yeah, actually that's one of my things. I've written some articles about First Enoch and some of these other books I have, and there's a chapter on First Enoch in my book, and a couple of chapters on another book called Jubilees, and so this is right up my alley if you want to talk about this stuff outside of the Bible. I can talk all day about that stuff.
Well, what you do anyway? I used to go to Liberty University.
All right.
Yeah, so God loves you too.
That's where my father-in-law went to school, so I like Liberty. All right. What about angels' character? Let's kind of go through this. They're created holy during the period of probation. Some chose to remain holy, others chose to become evil. Now they are either permanently holy or permanently evil. It never says this. The Bible never says there was a period of probation. Some made the choice and now they're stuck. That maybe that's what happened, and this will be something that we can talk about in a couple of weeks when we talk about the story of the fall of the angels. But the Bible never says this explicitly. This is kind of, some of our guesses as to how things may have happened. What about this slide here? Their activity, worship God, execute God's will. Now, this is the one I probably have the fewest problems with. Yes, we see stories or passages in which angels are described as worshiping God. Does that mean that they do this sort of thing all the time, or are they just doing it in these passages? When John looks into heaven, he sees angels worshiping God. Does that mean that's how it always is, or do you just catch them on a Sunday morning worship service or something like that? We don't know. But we do have passages where they're worshiping God. They certainly execute God's will. But that's pretty broad. That can encompass a lot. And so I think that one question that we can ask in our weeks together is, what else can we say about that? Is there any more that we can know about how exactly angels carry out God's will? What sorts of things do they do for God? Are there things that they don't do? Are there different kinds of angels or different kinds of heavenly beings that do different things? Do they have different roles? Yes, such as a guardian, yeah. Are there guardian angels that are protecting individuals now? Or are there no guardian angels? Or are there guardian angels, but they're different from the way that we suppose? So what can we say more about how angels do or do not execute God's will? Now, what I want to do now, that's the part of the lecture where we're kind of debunking this. We're going through some common conceptions about angels and calling a lot of them into question. Now, how do we go about finding the answer to these things? So this is the delineating methods part. If we want to study angels, if we want to find answers to these questions, if we want to know what angels are really like in the Bible, then how do we go about doing that? And what I'm going to give now are 5 principles for studying angels, demons, etc. And actually, these principles can apply to studying almost any theological topic in the Bible. So what I'm going to talk about now is, if you want to investigate a theological topic in the Bible, how do you go about it? What are some rules of thumb? What are some guidelines for doing this? If I were really creative, I would have said something like 5 principles for studying principalities or something like that. But I wasn't quite that clever. The first thing that I think is really important, and let me tell you this, if you're not comfortable with me telling you how to do something, read this as this is how I do it myself. So I'm just going to tell you how I go about studying the Bible and asking theological questions of the Bible. The first thing that I do is I actually read the Bible. The Bible is my source of information. As a Christian myself, and I know that there are Christians who differ from me on this, but as a Christian myself, I really want to get my thinking from the Bible. I'm not as comfortable with I think that other sources of information can be very valuable. I certainly want to consult theologians, the writings of other Christians, even read what non-Christians have to say about various topics. But for me, the Bible is the ultimate guide that I can trust as reliable. It's unique in that way. So that's where I'm going for my information. But when I read the Bible, I need to do it very carefully. Because when we read the Bible, we may go to the Bible and think that we're getting our information from the Bible, but if we're not really careful about it, what we can do is just kind of read our own ideas into the Bible. There are a couple of illustrations I use for this. I didn't think about doing it tonight. I probably should have done it here. But there's the first day of my Old Testament class at Carson Newman, when I teach Introduction to the Old Testament, the first thing I do is I read them a poem written by an Old Testament scholar. And this poem is one that all of you heard. It's called "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," actually written by an Old Testament scholar named Clement Clark Moore. And I read them this poem, and then I say, well, here's a quiz to see how well you interpreted that poem. And I ask them one question, and it is this: how tall is Santa Claus? Now, does anyone know the answer to this? Pastor Bob, do you know the answer to this? You're smiling like you know what's going on.
I know the poem, but
you know the poem? Okay. And the night before Christmas, Santa's really short. I didn't even realize this until a few years ago. You may recall the language. He's driving a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeers. Yeah, he's a little old driver, so lively and quick. He's a jolly old elf. There are various, the speaker says something like, he hears on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. Santa is a small guy. Then I showed them like illustrated versions of The Night Before Christmas that were published, in this millennium. And they all show Santa being, like the Santa that we know. Then I showed them an edition of it from about 120 years ago, and it's Santa this tall. It has a picture of him standing on a chair so that he can reach the stocking and put things in the stocking. So Santa in the story is really small, but I didn't realize that until just a few years ago. I heard this quote so many times. And the reason is, when I read a text, I tend just to, if I'm not really careful, I read my own ideas into it. Even if the text doesn't say how tall Santa is, or even if the text says very clearly Santa is short, I still think tall Santa, because I read my own ideas into the text. That's what I do in my Old Testament class. In my New Testament class, what I have students do the first day of class is take a piece of paper and draw a picture of Humpty Dumpty. And everyone draws an egg. Now, some of the eggs are sitting on the wall, some of the eggs are mid-flight or mid-fall, and some of the eggs are they've seen their better days. But there's nothing in the poem of Humpty Dumpty that says that Humpty Dumpty is an egg. And there are actually things in the poem that don't make sense. Why would you need all of the king's horses and all of the king's men to put Humpty Dumpty back together? It doesn't take a lot of horses to do that. I mean, horses can't do that at all, right? and so and I've done a little research on like the history of Humpty Dumpty, and I found an illustrated version of Humpty Dumpty dating back to the 19th century, in which Humpty Dumpty is an overweight child, and he falls off the wall, and he's so overweight that the horses can't get him back up on the wall. This is about something that is large, not something that's fragile. Actually, the first depiction of Humpty Dumpty as an egg is in J. Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass in like 1873. Do you know the date on that? The late 19th century. And so that was the very first time that Humpty Dumpty is depicted as an egg. So it's just... What was that?
It just became the iconic image.
No, I mean, can you imagine Humpty Dumpty any other way? There's something very powerful about thoughts that we have encountered. I mean, how many times have we heard the Bible taught? We've seen Sunday school literature, perhaps. I don't know if the tradition has Sunday school literature or not, with pictures, children's Bible. The Bible has been portrayed in live action movies, TV series, animated series. I've seen vegetables portray the Bible. And so when we're reading the Bible, it's almost impossible not to envision what we've always thought. And so it's the same thing when we're doing angels, demons, whatever it is we're thinking about. Now, so much of what we've been taught about the Bible is correct. My point is not to say that everything you've learned is incorrect. That would be wrong. We've been taught well by the Christians who have come before us. But we need to be really careful because there may be some things that we've missed or we've misunderstood. And so we start with the Bible, and we have to be very intentional with how we read it. If we read the Bible casually, which is great, I'd rather people read the Bible casually than read other things casually. But if we read it casually, we're kind of passive when we read it, then we run the risk, I think, of imposing our own ideas on it rather than getting our ideas from it. All right, principle number 1, read the Bible very carefully. Principle number 2, acknowledge the limits of what we can know. One of the things that I tell students at school is that one of the ingredients of good biblical interpretation is simply the willingness to say, the Bible doesn't answer this question that I have. As much as I would like to know X, if the Bible doesn't talk about it, then that's not a question that I can answer. Or at least it's not a question I can answer in terms of what the Bible says. And maybe an example of this would be this probationary period for angels. Maybe that explains why we have some good angels and some bad angels now. But we don't know. There's no passage in the Bible that says all of these angels were good and then they went bad. Again, some of you are probably thinking about Isaiah 14 right now or Ezekiel 28. this story about the morning star who falls from heaven, or the cherub that's in the Garden of Eden and gets cast out. And we'll talk about those passages in a couple of weeks. But we don't have a story about a probationary. So however we define probationary, we don't have that story in the Bible. Another one, this is a little trickier. But one principle that I find helpful when I read the Bible is the goal of being alert to diverse use of terminology by biblical authors. We all know that the same English word can have many different meanings, right? So if I tell you the word trunk, Trunk, apart from any context, that could mean like 4 or 5 different things, right? It could be a box that I keep in my attic where my old clothes are, or old photographs. It can be the thing on the back of my car where I keep my umbrella and my jumper cables. It can be the base of a tree. It could be what I wear when I go swimming. I guess those are trunks, though. Swim trunks. It could be an elephant nose. The word trunk can mean a lot of different things. When we read the Bible, it's the same way. Sometimes different biblical authors may use the same word or the same expression of speech, but refer to different things when they do that. So here's one example: Son of God. Who is the Son of God, or who is a Son of God in the Bible? Well, this expression is used for a lot of different people, a lot of different persons. The sons of God in Job refer to these beings that get together with God in heaven, and Satan seems to be one of them. Israel is referred to as God's firstborn son. Jesus, of course, this is the most famous one, is the Son of God. Then you have, let's see here, John chapter 1, I think, where it says, many believed him, to them he gave the authority to become sons of God. And so we have this one expression, and it's used in a variety of ways, and with reference to a variety of different persons. And not even all of these persons are good. Some of these persons are bad. So just when we see a phrase, just because one book of the Bible uses this expression and the same expression appears in another book of the Bible, that doesn't mean they're always talking about the same thing. Yes?
You've got Son of God.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in small letters. So that's not referring to Jesus Christ. And normally when they're saying sons, with the X of God, and not Son of God is Jesus Christ.
Right.
So that should be sons.
I'm a son of God, singular.
Yeah.
So,
Right, but
I'm not the son, the God.
Right.
But we're referred to as the sons of God.
Mm-hmm.
But you're referred to as a son, singular, right?
But I don't believe I've ever seen where it was referring to one of us as a son of God, because they were normally referring to a group that we are now sons of God for following the Lord Jesus Christ.
Sure. And that's actually a helpful observation. And I say actually not because I expected anything else from you, but because I think it really is helpful that paying attention to is a singular or plural. Sometimes that gives us a clue to, for instance, the plural, sons of God in the Old Testament seems to refer almost exclusively to divine beings. You don't have sons of God referring to Israel. Israel is called God's firstborn son, singular. In the New Testament, I'm trying to think, Jesus, I think, is singular Son of God. The plural sons of God refers to, I don't think it ever refers to like angelic or divine beings in the New Testament. I think it refers more frequently to Christians. You do have the singular Son of God in Daniel chapter 6, and it's controversial because some people interpret that as Jesus and other people interpret that as like an angelic being. And it's singular there. But yeah, the singular versus plural, that can help clarify some things, but you also get even the singular Son of God refers to different people, and the plural sons of God refers to different people as well.
I always figured when I was talking about the Son of God, it'd be in capital letter.
And I think in Hebrew and Greek, they actually did not distinguish between lowercase and capital. In Greek, they would typically write all in lowercase or all capital letters, and in Hebrew, they didn't have different letters. There was just one kind of letter. And so when you see capital letters, what that tells you is that the English translator thinks that it's Jesus. Not that the Greek or Hebrew says that it's Jesus. So, yeah, your English Bibles really are good. Don't let me undermine your confidence in your English Bibles. Please read them. They're done by expert translators, and they're not going to steer you wrong, generally speaking. On the other hand, there are some places where the translators disagree. And so if you read Daniel 7, or Daniel 6, for instance, sometimes some translators will capitalize Son of God, and other translators will give you a lowercase s because the translators disagree about that. If you're really interested in the passage and wanting to figure out exactly what it means and study it closely, a good practice would be to look at multiple translations. That'll help avoid some of the ways that some of the weaknesses of English translations. Get around those. Let's see, another example here, angel of the Lord. We're going to talk about the angel of the Lord more next week. Sometimes angel of the Lord appears to be God himself. Other times angel of the Lord just means an angel from God. I know that first one may seem weird, the angel of the Lord being God himself. We'll look at that next week. There are several passages in which it talks about the angel of the Lord appearing, and people think that they're seeing God. Different expressions can be used in different ways, and I guess unpacking this just a little bit, or this one relates to it. I guess it's a different concept, but it relates to it. Principle number 4, be attentive to the diachronic relationship between biblical texts. So there's our big fancy word for the day, diachronic. Diachronic, what it means literally is through time. When I think of the Bible diachronically, what that means is that I'm taking into account that you have various books of the Bible that were written over the course of over 1,000 years. And that what people were thinking of angels back when Genesis was written is a little different from what people are thinking of angels when the book of Revelation is written. And I'm not saying that the truth changed or that these books contradict each other or anything like that. But the way they talk about angels and some of the information they presume and even what they teach about angels is going to develop over time. I was talking with my students this morning about this very thing, not with reference to angels, but about how different parts of the Bible can have different perspectives on things. And so I referred to prophecies in Jeremiah about the Messiah. And then I pointed to the New Testament where Jesus is called the Messiah. And I said, well, Jeremiah didn't know that the Messiah was going to be named Jesus. He knew that the Messiah was coming, but he didn't know that the Messiah was going to be named Jesus. And he didn't know a lot of the things that Jesus was going to do. He knew some of the things, but not everything. And so when we come to the New Testament, they know more about the Messiah. They know that the Messiah is going to be named Jesus, that his parents are Mary and sort of Joseph. And they knew more about what Jesus was going to do. And so theology and thinking could change over time. Not in a way that undermines different parts of the Bible. They're all true, but there are differences in perspective, different things that are communicated by different texts. And well, let me give you this example. How many times do we have the word demon in the Old Testament? Huh?
I cannot even hazard a guess.
Good guess. That's close. 2 times.
Wow.
2 times. We have the word demon in again, your translations may vary, but the word that's typically translated as demon is the Hebrew word shade. That will not be on your test at the end of it. But that word occurs twice in the Old Testament. Once in Deuteronomy 32, referring to the nations worshiping demons. Another time in Psalm, 106, I believe. A reference to Israel sacrificing their children to demons. Only twice. Now, how many times do you think the word demon occurs in the New Testament? A lot. A whole bunch. Why? Why does the Old Testament have so little to say about demons, and we turn to the New Testament and demons are all over the place? That's because thinking about demons had kind of changed. Demons were really a hot conversation topic when the New Testament was being written. Not as hot of a conversation topic in Old Testament Israel. And that doesn't mean that the New Testament contradicts the Old Testament or that truth changed. Truth is truth. But these biblical books are communicating different theological perspectives to different contexts. Some books are going to say a whole lot about demons, and other books aren't going to be really concerned about them at all. And the same can be true of different other concepts of angels and whatnot. Yes?
I was just thinking and you probably will, say the same thing about Satan.
Yep.
I suppose, Old Testament, like when Satan comes and tempts Adam and Eve in the garden, except it doesn't say it's Satan, right?
That's right.
We read into it that it's Satan. We find out later that, Satan's the tempter, but, you read the whole Old Testament thinking that it's Satan, but that it didn't say that.
Yeah, we were actually talking about that in class today. We did Genesis 3 today, and I said, "Who is the serpent?" And everybody, Satan, Satan. And I said, "Okay, what verse in Genesis 3 says that?" And they're like, "It doesn't say that." Like, where in the Bible do you have to turn to find that? And they don't realize this typically. So every once in a while, I get a student who's been told about this, I guess. But you have to turn all the way to the very last book of the Bible before you have explicitly Satan connected with the serpent of Genesis 3. Now, there may be a couple of other passages that implicitly does this, but you have to turn all the way from Genesis to Revelation to find the place where it says Satan is a serpent. Genesis 3 doesn't say that. So what's happened between the time of Genesis and the time of Revelation where Genesis wasn't saying that, and then in Revelation, John is saying that. And that's this diachronic dynamic, I guess, that later biblical authors are bringing different information to the conversation than some of the earlier biblical authors. They may be using the terms differently. They may have more to say about different angelic beings than earlier ones do. And just something to keep in mind. It's not a scary thing. Again, this doesn't call into question any biblical truth in my mind. Now, you can probably find some scholars does. I had when I wrote my book, I had my PhD supervisor write a foreword to the book. And in my book, I show how ideas about Satan develop over time. And in the foreword to the book, before it's published, my PhD supervisor, he says, Ryan Stokes has proved that Satan is merely a human construct. And I said, no! And I asked him to change it. I said, you can't say that. That's not what I do, and I prefer not to be fired for my job at Southwestern Seminary. These ideas can develop without implying that any of them are untrue or that any of them are less true than others. Just because the Bible isn't one book written at one time by one person as a systematic theology doesn't mean that it's any less true. We have 66 different books that represent almost that many perspectives, addressing almost that many different contexts, and representing almost that many different personalities of the biblical authors, and the different unique things that each of these books can contribute can inform our perspective. of Satan. But we want to be careful to appreciate the differences and not assume that they're all talking about exactly the same thing. When we're talking about angels or demons or God or whatever, they can be saying different things. They don't all have to say the same thing. I'll try to give you some examples. I know I'm speaking kind of in the abstract or the hypothetical or theoretical right now, but in the coming weeks, you'll kind of see this in practice where I'm saying, well, here's what they're saying about sons of God in this text, but if we go a little later, they're saying this different thing. They're using the expression in a different way. And so you'll get to see kind of that in practice and make up your mind about whether you think this is a useful principle or not. All right. Principle number 5. And this is where we get to what the woman over here was saying just a moment. I don't know her name, I apologize. Consult literature or ancient literature outside of the Bible as an aid to understanding the Bible. And this is something I do a lot of. I've written on the Dead Sea Scrolls and studied them. I've written on the Apocrypha. These writings that are not in the Jewish Bible or the Protestant Bible, but are in the Roman Catholic Bible. I've written and read about these things and looked to see what these say about some of these topics. And there are other writings from this time that can help us to, the question of why are demons only really mentioned twice, or at least that word is only used twice in the Old Testament, but then used a bunch in the New Testament. And if we read some of these writings that were written between the Old and New Testament, that helps us to see kind of how these ideas developed, or how the conversation developed. Now, I'm not telling you that you need to go out and buy a copy of the Dead Sea Scrolls and read it tonight. If you want to, I'd love to talk with you about it. It's not going to, they're not scary. They're not going to cause you to question your faith or anything like that. What they do is help us to appreciate the context of the Bible and help us to bridge the gap, historically speaking, between the Old and New Testament. If you're interested in what this literature says about angels or what it says about another theological topic, this is a place where you can consult like good commentaries and other books about the Bible and read how scholars have engaged this literature and how they've not broken it down, but synthesized it and put it together and discussed how these writings are relevant for the Bible. So if you read a commentary, they're going to expose you to this literature and help you process it. Yes?
My thought on why there's only a couple times in the Old Testament compared to the New Testament is because Jesus Christ has come, he's gone to the cross, and he's teaching, and then able to get rid of confusion, better understanding. The fallen angels are spoken of as demonic, as demons, as fallen spirits. So there's less confusion, better understanding, to be able to put a point across. That's how I feel.
Sure. So you're saying that Jesus came and Jesus clarified these things, or I'm not sure that I understood exactly what you were saying.
Like when he's casting the spirits out. Spirit is a demon. Demon is something that's gotten in somebody because of the way their lives have been. So, he's calling them out, he's throwing them out, and he has authority over all. And he's just commands them to leave. But to sit there and call them fallen angels, as in the Old Testament, they're referred to, and they're actually been referred to as the fallen sons of God in the Old Testament also. But rather than to be there, he's trying to separate them from the heaven to the earth, because they're now all they're in the earth, they're on the earth. They're no longer in heaven. And I believe that the only one that can go to heaven is when he's been summoned by God himself. Come on, let's talk. other than that, I don't think he has the right to be there either. So it's all for clarification, for us to be able to understand. And that's what I see there.
Sure. Yeah, and thank you so much. You're anticipating a lot of the things that we're going to talk about in the coming weeks. So your mind's kind of you're ahead of the game a little bit. So that's great. Yeah, we will talk about these things more, and certainly I think that I like the New Testament. Yeah, I have my PhD in Old Testament, but I almost wanted to get I planned to get it in New Testament originally, but ended up getting it in Old Testament instead. But the New Testament it's not superfluous. It's clarifying some things that are less clear in the Old Testament. And a big part of that is the fact that Jesus came and clarified some things that people were confused about when they just had the Old Testament. Having said that, I also think it's helpful to think that ideas were changing over time. So if you were to read Jewish literature before the time of the New Testament, if you were to read, let's see here, there we go. If you were to read some of the Dead Sea Scrolls or First Enoch, you made it back just in time. If you were to read the Dead Sea Scrolls and First Enoch, you see that they're really interested, even before the time of Christ, they're really interested in demons and evil spirits and fallen angels. And so certainly we can say that the New Testament, the revelation in it, the information that we get from the New Testament, that it clarifies some of the things that were left unclarified by the Old Testament. But we can also think of this historically, where the New Testament is taking part in a larger conversation that had arisen since the time of the Old Testament, involving angels and other sorts of beings. So we can think of it theologically on the one hand, but also historically. I think both of them are helpful as we're trying to get at this topic. Does that make sense? Does that clarify kind of where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, good. But I'm impressed at how you're anticipating some of the things we're going to be talking about. So here's some examples. I just mentioned the Dead Sea Scrolls, First Enoch, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Maybe sometime I can come back and do a lecture, do a series on the Dead Sea Scrolls. Those are a lot of fun.
You've just been committed.
I've taught on the Dead Sea Scrolls. I've studied the Dead Sea Scrolls. I've even studied on fake Dead Sea Scrolls. So that's a story for another time, certainly. But Enoch, First Enoch as well. This is a book written, actually it's a collection of books written between the 3rd century BC and the 1st century BC or the 1st century AD. Scholars disagree about when it was wrapped up. But a text that's not in the Bible, unless you're a member of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. If you're in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, then First Enoch's in your Bible. But not in the Bible. But this is a book that a lot of Jews around the time of Jesus and the other New Testament authors, a lot of Jews were reading these. As a matter of fact, the New Testament authors, even some of them had read First Enoch. Jude even quotes from First Enoch. Not that First Enoch is scripture, but this was a popular book at the time. And so one way that we can understand what's going on in the Bible a little better is by exposing ourselves to some of the same ideas that the New Testament authors and the other group of authors were exposed to. Not because these are scripture. These are not scripture. First Enoch is not in my Bible. The Dead Sea Scrolls, some of the Dead Sea Scrolls are actually copies of the Old Testament, but the ones that aren't copies of the Bible, they're not in my Bible. But this helps us to understand the context of the Bible a little better. Maybe if you go 1,000 years in the future and you dig up a poster that says "Make America Great Again," are you going to know what that's talking about?
Yes.
Donald Trump, I don't know. Maybe he will be revered. Maybe history will look really fondly at it. I don't know. I'm not going to make any predictions, and I'm not going to tell you how I voted. That's for sure. If you're a historian and you've studied, early 21st century American politics, then you're going to understand what "Make America Great Again" means. If you haven't been exposed to that, then "Make America Great," you may not even know what America is in 1,000 years. We don't know what's going to happen with this nation, right? So it can help understanding the context a little bit, can help us understand what the Bible is teaching. And I don't mean to, please don't be intimidated by that. Don't take me to say, hey, there's all this literature that you've missed out on and you've misunderstood the Bible. That's not what I'm saying. You've understood the Bible, your English translations are good, you've been taught the Bible, well, but there's some other resources out there that can help us understand a little bit more about the Bible. And some of those are this literature here, or other commentators, other people who've written about the Bible or talked about the Bible, who've made use of this literature and can help us understand it better as well, and understand the Bible better as a result.
What is it that Jesus brings up, like the Book of War? Just a reference. It's not in the Bible, it's the Book of War, and there's another one. That he just spoke of it. Next time I'll have it.
Okay.
It's just something that's brought up. I wonder, you know, like the Book of Enoch and the other lost stone. Maybe it'll kind of give you an idea of, like you said, what it was in that time, the beliefs or customs of.
Right.
You know, like we plant every time capsules here. Maybe one day people would dig it up. Maybe someone up north did dig one up recently. And, you know, looking back all those years. So, you know, there's a lot of questions, and like with the Delineating, there's a lot of things that make you think about those questions.
Those are fascinating books.
They are.
Fascinating. Yeah, and there's a Numbers. Book of Numbers quotes the Book of the Wars of Yashub or something like that. And Luke is kind of the most famous example. Luke says in his gospel, look, other people have written about this stuff. Other people have written about Jesus, and I read that, and now I'm taking the results of my research and putting it down for you, most excellent Theophilus, is how Luke addresses the person that he's writing to. But these New Testament authors, and the Old Testament authors for that matter, they weren't just sitting around waiting for God to come to them and tell them to write something. They were reading things and thinking about things. They were talking about theological issues with their friends, their other Christian friends or Jewish friends, and so understanding a bit about these conversations that they were having, whether in writing or in spoken form, can help us understand what they're talking about when they write the New Testament or write the books of the Bible. So that's how I do. That's what you're going to see over the next few weeks is we'll be talking about a topic, and I'll say, well, here's what some books of the Old Testament say about this. Now let's look at what this Dead Sea Scroll says about this issue. Now let's look at the New Testament, and you can kind of see the progression, how the New Testament relates to what the Old Testament said. Sometimes the New Testament authors are interpreting the Old Testament very similarly to some of the early Jewish authors. Sometimes they're doing it differently. But looking at this literature that's not in the Bible, and I'm certainly not making a case that there's a scholar right now trying to make a case that Christians should have some of these books in their Bible, and that's not what I'm doing. But looking at these can help us to kind of bridge the gap between the Old and New Testament, and then maybe give us a clue about how we put it together ourselves. All right, I guess I could recap my 5 principles if I can. Let's see here. Read the Bible carefully, acknowledge the limits of what we can know. The Bible doesn't answer all of the questions that we're going to have. Some of them, it doesn't mean our questions are bad either. Our questions can be good questions. It's just a question that God chose not to answer for us. Be alert to diverse use of terminology by biblical authors. They can use the same language in different ways. Be attentive to the diachronic relationship in biblical text. Be aware that these writers are writing at different times, and that may the times in which they write may be informing what they're choosing to talk about with us. And then finally, consult ancient literature outside of the Bible as an aid to understanding the Bible. All right, that is all that I have as far as my presentation today. How do I know time? We nearly went an hour and a half. Perfect. But I have 4 minutes left for questions, or if you just want to say, I've had enough of this.
Yeah, I just had I think a real obvious and simple and non-threatening example of using literature of the day outside the Bible would be if there were a Greek word in the New Testament that only appears in the New Testament one time. One time. What does that word mean? There's no place else in the New Testament. You just look at the way that word was used, in the first century and other documents, which is how we know what all these words mean anyway. We know how it's used in the today. So just the use of Greek language, in order to know what words mean, you have to look elsewhere other than just the Bible.
That's absolutely right. Greek dictionaries don't write themselves.
Yeah.
And so the people who write these Greek dictionaries, that's what they do. They look at the way a Greek word is used all over ancient literature. And then, as a New Testament author or New Testament interpreter, when they're not sure about what a word means, they can use this dictionary. Or they can go right to what Homer or Thucydides or whatever Greek composer it is who used this word. And so that's a great example. Very non-threatening, it's just basic matter of fact. We have to look at literature outside of the Bible to make sense of certain statements in the Bible. Or at least it can help.
Thank you, Ron.
My pleasure.
So much.
My pleasure. So next week, I think we're going to actually talk about different kinds of angels. We're going to look at angels and other divine beings, not just angels, but other heavenly beings or divine beings. And we can even talk about what word do we use to, what do we call these beings? If we can't call them all angels, what do we call them? And we can look at different kinds of seraphim, cherubim, sons of God, angel of the Lord, all these sorts of things, all these sorts of beings, and what the Bible says about them.